how to be a successful artist by figuring out what that means. Now, think about success. Think about success. Well, what is it? What does it mean? How do we understand success? If we go by a simple dictionary definition, success is the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So if you want to be a successful artist, that's accomplishing an aim or purpose within the scope of an artistic discipline. So if we want to get anywhere, in the question of being a successful artist, we have to start with this first step. What is the aim or purpose you wish to accomplish as an artist? And this is a question I hope to help you answer today. It can be kind of tricky to do because art is a broad discipline. And to help with that question, we can actually look at the example set for us by music. Music is a broad discipline too. Now, if you have a favorite artist of some kind, think about what they're known for. What's their thing? Your favorite musical artist. There's a pretty high chance that your favorite musical artist is going to be someone who is not successful, who is not good at every single instrument, but rather they're good or great at a single instrument, good enough at that single instrument to be able to build a career off of it. So if we take that example from music, we can apply that to our art and think about what your instrument is going to be and learning how to become great with that and become a successful artist through that. Think of one thing you want to do as an artist. Let me qualify that. That doesn't mean limiting yourself from trying things, but what that does mean is focusing on one thing long enough either to achieve its definition of success or to find out what your definition of success actually is if it's not applicable with what you're trying to do to start off with. Now, we have some broad categorical selections when it comes to success as an artist. We have basically the different expressions of the medium: the concept art, the 3D art, the illustration, the comic art, the animation, the painting, the graphic design, and that's just within the visual arts, what I'm most familiar with. Within this example, even under these broad categorical selections, there are still clear niches to investigate and select from in order to define your success. Now, if you're already inside one of these disciplines, you can learn the niche under that, or the needs or questions that aren't being answered inside the niche you're already in. And then once you've selected that niche, set clear goals. If you don't have clear goals, you're never going to be a successful artist. If you don't know what success is, you can't be successful. Simple as that. When it comes to the definition of success for each individual person, there's a few ways people think about it. These are the elements of success, the common metrics that we think in terms of when it comes to success: making a living, achieving mastery, communicating a message, developing a respectable body of work, becoming known in that specific discipline of yours, and whether you work for yourself or someone else. Now, each of these is not necessarily a success benchmark in and of themselves. A definition of success is more like making a polygon graph and getting your definition of success by determining what your answer is to each of these questions. Now, the first actually in importance in my view is the question of achieving mastery. And it's going to be the secret ingredient to nearly every creative pursuit you can think of. It's a worthy goal all on its own, art for art's sake. I know some people who are doing just that, and they're not making a living necessarily, but they're doing better as a person because of that. And again, achieving mastery, you're going to need at least a little mastery no matter what your final definition of success is. Unless, of course, you're creating strictly for yourself and no one else, which is valid. Just bear in mind there's some fruit you're not going to see in your creative journey if you're only making for yourself. In the question of achieving mastery, you need to know how good you need to become. Knowing how good you want to become helps design a route between where you are with your skills right now and where you need to be to create the kind of art that you want. And to know how good you want to become, you have to have at least one concrete example of the kind of art you're trying to create in order to effectively use this metric. Now, the nice thing about that, the best artists, or the artists we admire, there's publication. Publication, whether it's in book form, animated form, whether it's just online. Examples of great art are available everywhere. So you can find someone who's doing the kind of art you want to do and learn about their creative journey, and that's going to help you develop your map for achieving creative mastery. If you've got at least one concrete example, you may have an existing roadmap, because a lot of people share their journeys to where they are in their field, how they got to their place of success, how they got to their place of mastery. The answers are out there. You have the answers. They're available. All you have to do after that is put in the work. Which I know might be a bummer to hear, but it's simply a fact of life. But you don't have to go in blind. You can figure out what work you have to put in. The next element, and this is just after mastery because it's important to the human experience, figuring out whether you want to make a living off of art. Do you want your art to provide for you? Do you want it to pay your bills? It's okay if the answer is no. It's not the way for everybody. That's a valid thing. If you do wish to make a living, however, the key metric is that your art needs to be worth more than someone else's money. That's not as hard as it sounds. It's not hard for your art to be worth more than someone else's money. It just depends on whose money you're after. If you're after a corporation's money, if you're after a 9-to-5 type job or a 6 or 7 figure contract, you're going to be required to have an incredible level of mastery that solves a money-making problem for that company. You will have to possess an incredible skill that a company stands in need of, and that's usually going to be lined out in a job description. So there again, you'll have a roadmap to making a living in that specific area, but the trick about that, well, we'll talk about that later. Corporate money is not the only way to make a living in art. Direct to consumer is viable, and it's only more viable every single day. Just downstairs is an artist alley full of people enjoying varying degrees of success, but it's living proof that making a living with direct-to-consumer is viable. You still need skill, but if, for example, you can get 1,000 people to give you $100 a year, 1,000 people times $100 a year, that's, I believe, $100,000 a year if you can swing that. That's $100,000 right there. If you can impress 1,000 people enough to spend $100 on you each year and get them to stick around. Financial success as an artist may not be glamorous. You may not become rich and famous, but it's viable and realistic. You do have to figure out how much work that's going to require you, though, and that's just understanding how high your bills are. The next element we'll discuss here, communicating a message. And we discussed that a little bit in a previous panel of mine this weekend, but basically you just need to decide, you need to decide on the question of message in your art, because messages supercharge your art with the power of personal resonance. Your metric of success needs to have as a part of it how important message is when it comes to your art. And if message is important, you need to do enough work to cause people to remember your message. Now, some artists place their craft entirely under the service of delivering message, and it's not a wrong thing. Good ideas are a great contribution to your culture. If you got great ideas and you want to make the world better, art is a valid way to cause the world to be better, because you're going to help people remember the good ideas that you've got. Now, if you're going to have message as a critical part of your success metric, you need to have a really clear understanding between your message and the level of mastery you have to have required to serve that message. How good you have to be at art to get people to remember. Comics are a common manifestation of the power of pictures and messaging cooperation. Even if they're not that pretty to look at, if they're well written, they're still going to cause us to stop, read, and process what we are seeing in order to consume the work, and we're going to remember it better because we had to stop and process it. Now, if you choose to forego the question of message in your art, you need to remember you cannot completely divorce message and art. Every piece of art is going to have some idea attached to it. If you're just trying to make something as a flex of pure skill, it's not a bad thing. Just remember that you might have a more difficult time connecting with people and getting along. Now, the requirement for mastery is going to go astronomically high the more you choose to move away from the presence of message in your art. Now, the next step after this, we've gone over a level of mastery. We've gone over communicating your message. We've gone over whether you want to make a living. Part of that is also going to be a respectable body of work. These are all connected to each other in the final question. A respectable body of work, you have to have that. You have to have a big enough body of work. You might have heard about this story, but there were two potters. Two people who make pots. One was told to make the most perfect pot he could, and the other was told to make as many pots as he could. And they checked up on these two potters after a few months and discovered that the person who was told to make as many pots as possible actually ended up being better at making pots than the person who was told to focus on perfection. The moral of the story is that the more you create, the more work you create, the more naturally you will do well at whatever your defined metrics of success is. So then, you need to understand how much art do you need to make? How much art is it going to take for you to be successful? Well, first, it's enough art to achieve mastery. Do enough art to get good. You do enough art to sell and make enough money for yourself. That dollar amount might be zero, or it might be an actual respectable number of money, but you got to make enough art to support that. You'll need to do enough art to get the right person's attention. The person who you want to connect with in the name of message, or the person who's got the big enough checkbook to sign off to pay for your life. Enough art to communicate the message you want heard. Enough art for people to remember what you're trying to say. Any success metric that you choose, any mission that you design for yourself is probably going to require more art, not less. So make plenty of work. Make plenty of things that you love and believe in. You're going to have a better time as a result of that anyway, because you have the body of work to point back to. The next metric to go over in this case, in our matrix, notoriety in your field. Does success mean that your art is instantly recognized? It doesn't have to. Self-gratification is a fine and valid objective for your art. But beyond the hobbyist level, some level of notoriety is going to be required as defined as by your other metrics of success. So then, if notoriety in your field is important, post things people remember. Post often enough that you are remembered. Post frequently, consistently enough that you are remembered. So both quantity and consistency, posting a good volume, but also spreading that out so you're a part of people's lives regularly. And post for a long enough span of time to attract the attention of the right people. Every artist that possesses the notoriety that you want, every artist that possesses the popularity that you want, earned it with time, effort, and study, and it took a little while. There's not really such a thing as overnight success. There's a lot of work that goes behind popularity. There's a lot of work that goes behind being well known and having good skills. And it took the famous artists a while. It may take you a while too, and that's okay. Be okay with that. Be at home with that, with the fact that there's going to be a journey. The next question in our matrix, who you work for, yourself or someone else? And we touched on this a little bit in making a living. Now we're dealing with how you make a living versus whether you make a living. Now, if you're thinking about an office type job for an artist, you come in 9 to 5, solve creative problems, and clock out. Office jobs as an artist are few and far between. They are incredibly discriminate when it comes to their skill requirement. They're commonly geographically restricted, and they're actively being fought for by someone else qualified for the seat. There's 2 places in the world that I know of that are doing production art as an office job, just as a regular standing thing. That would be Toronto and Los Angeles. Those are the two big centers for commercial art. Now, there's more and more remote work lately, but that's going to increase the skill ceiling when it comes to how good you have to be for someone to pay you and you still be drawing in your home office. And there again, there's a lot of competition. And the advent of remote work, the uprising of remote work has made that skill pool significantly wider. So there's a lot of people fighting for office jobs as an artist. They are a little more mentally secure because you're letting someone else do all the marketing and all the hustle for you when it comes to finding the work. They're a little easier to process idea-wise. You'll be given an assignment and your job is to simply process and complete that assignment. But they're scarce and subject to someone else's rules. Much the same. It's simply a day job, but as an artist, both for better and worse. You can also be your own boss. You can do your own thing. Now, being your own boss is not necessarily easier or harder. Instead of having all that work focused on your art, it's going to be more administrative responsibility. You're going to be the marketer. You're going to be the CEO. You're going to be the finance person. More marketing responsibility. But if you are your own boss, you might turn up a little richer. You know, someone else is not taking the cut. The only other person really taking the cut of money before you is going to be Uncle Sam. Or whoever, and also whoever does state taxes, if you happen to work somewhere that does state taxes too. Sorry. But you will be the first person to touch the money and decide, how do I handle this? What do I do with this? And if after all your expenses and taxes, you've got room to give yourself a bigger paycheck, you have the authority and agency to give yourself that bigger paycheck. The exchange is going to be a little less stable. You may not always have the work you're looking for, although you can plan and design for that if you're thinking in the long term. You can build a business that's stable for you just the same as a day job might be stable for you. And you're going to be a little bit more free. You'll be able to choose the work you do. You'll be able to choose what time of day you work. You'll be able to choose who you work with. I'm a little bit more on the side of aiming towards self-employment as an artist because that's my dream, and I believe that's a little bit more viable for everybody if they're willing to put in the work. Self-employed artists of all kinds exist, and you can find a self-employed artist doing what you want to do, and you can learn from their example. They're usually pretty happy to share how they got there and how you can get there too. The success is out there. It can take a little time, but all you have to do is go get it. It's yours for the taking if you're willing to go take it. So, what now? We've dealt with the metrics of success, and many of them can work as singular goals, but the elements and metrics of success are parts of a vision, not a vision in and of themselves. So, ask yourself each question. Let yourself know what you want. Let yourself understand what you're looking for. Now, don't do everything at once. You will give yourself a mental breakdown. That's not the greatest idea. Do one thing at a time until you're good at it, and then do the next thing. You know, answer each question one at a time, and then you can determine how you need to handle each question, both in terms of how urgent they are, how much work it's going to take. You can develop clear goals to answer all the questions when it comes to your success. And as you've answered all those questions, suddenly you'll find yourself in exactly the place you wanted to be. So now we get to my favorite part of the show, where we get to do a little Q&A, ask each other questions, share some wisdom. But that's going to be it for the replay. However, I would love to hear from you and your questions of success in the field of art. Let me know down in the comments what you're struggling with. Maybe we can talk. Maybe I can write an article about it, do another video, and we'll get you helped out. Y'all take care.